What's up? Welcome to the Body Lock. It's your man Ant Walker, joined by my good friend Matthew Wells. So before we begin things, remember to like, subscribe, share, tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. Now, 2020 is coming close to an end here. The UFC is done. Their calendar has concluded for a very, very busy 2020. We got through a stretch of 24 consecutive weekends with fights. Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Somehow we are still alive, and our significant others have not left us. So mad. uh we were actually in while we were celebrating, hey, might have a weekend off here. We got wind of something else. The timeline was blowing up on social media with the new movie. One Dana White has sanctioned for release via the official UFC channels there. A video that features it's about 5 minutes of just Dana praise, just praise for the UFC being the only major sporting league to keep functioning during the earlier days of the pandemic, and took a fair amount of time out of that 5 minutes to target some media members in particular and the media in general for the desires to, I guess, shut down the sport. Matt, what was your first reaction when you saw this video?
It was essentially like a big middle finger to all the journalists. Like you said right before the break, like we're all about to exhale. Like, I get a few weeks off. Let's relax. And then Dana drops this big, hey, F you guys. F all you people that cover this sport and make it interesting with all of the articles and all of the work and coverage and interviews that you guys do that draw people in and get people interested in the fighters. Screw all you guys for saying I couldn't put off fights during a global pandemic and questioning, our methods and how we were going to execute this and all sorts of things like that. Like, this thing looked like the summer blockbuster movie trailer for the hottest movie of the summer. Dana White walking through the corridors there. You got Josh Gross being the lead villain. Like, what the fuck was this thing, man?
And Alex K. Lee as the number one henchman. It was quite a spectacle. Like, the only thing that was missing was produced by Jerry Bruckheimer.
Yes.
At some point there, my first reaction was just pure laughter. I could not stop laughing. I mean, it took me at least 10 minutes or so to just calm down, like tears rolling down my face. I needed this laugh today. Yeah. It's seriously one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. Now, that being said, a lot of problems with this. A whole lot of problems. Yeah, and beyond the fact, which I'm sure we're gonna ride out on, the fact that someone felt the need to just like masturbate on video like this for everybody. It's the most self-serving, egomaniacal bullshit that I've seen since his best friend was last spotted at a podium before he got his ass whooped in the election. So, Matt, the problems with this video, as far as the accuracy, the first thing I want to talk about is the hit job on the media here. The media was portrayed as targeting the UFC, targeting mixed martial arts or Dana in particular, or whatever the case may be, to shut down the sport. Let's dissect that. Where did media work to shut down mixed martial arts?
So a lot of the blowback from media came at the very onset of leagues shutting down. Like, the NBA got one case and shut the whole shit down immediately, right? And by contrast, the UFC, on the heels of other leagues already shutting down, was still like, yep, we're still putting on Kevin Lee versus Charles Oliveira in Brazil. No COVID protocols whatsoever. Like, we're still going forward with this thing. And Dana White being like ultra defiant as usual, like, yeah, we're still putting on fights. Like, fuck COVID. Like, what's COVID? Like, it's not a thing. It's going to be gone. It's going to be like everything Trump said, essentially, right? Of course, I'm paraphrasing a little bit of stuff there, but essentially that was the approach at the time. Like, hey, everybody else is shutting down right now, and you're pressing forward like this is not a big issue. This is a thing where governments are shutting shit down. Countries are shutting shit down. But you want to be the lone defiant one, like standing up like some hero in the, like saying, hey, we're still going to press on forward. Screw it, what all you guys are talking about. You're not going to shut us down. A mask? What? I'm not wearing a mask. What does that mean? Like all this kind of craziness, right? So they go forward with this event in Brazil. And that's like really when the height of all of this was going on. Like, why are you guys being so like defiant of everything going on right now? Meanwhile, NBA is not playing anymore. Rudy Gobert tested positive. Donovan Mitchell gets it, and NBA is done. And then, you fast forward a little bit. So that was like the initial blowback. That's when like everybody in MMA media was like, "What the fuck is going on right now?" Like,
and Matt, before we go further down the timeline, I do want to talk a little bit more about that and that particular moment. I want to dive into that a little deeper here because just in general, just you talking about living life, pretty scary time.
Right.
I'm transporting myself back to, that distant time of 9-10 months ago or whenever it was. I've got a newborn baby. My wife hasn't started working again yet. And, things are, on a tightrope in the household, just trying to, in general, like if a friend has a cold, no, you cannot come over see the baby. If if there's a cold going around work or some sort of illness, no, don't get around me. I got to go home to my son. So people are living lives like that. They're living lives where you are worried about things in general, and to have a literal global pandemic that is killing people, and having gotten wind of the devastation that it had already caused in China before we knew what was going on in the United States. Like due to my day job, I followed some of that from a financial standpoint. So I was abreast to some of it going on in the rest of the world, and to know this is out there, and to see a major entity like the NBA shut down, to know that pretty much all of Hollywood has shut down, movie production has ceased, TV production has ceased, pretty much everything that we know as entertainment has ceased. Yes, it is an opportunity for someone stubborn enough to keep pushing to provide entertainment, but at the same time, is it worth it? When we're looking at the risk, when we at that time did not understand what was going on, we just knew it was a war to get to the grocery store. People are being told to mask up and not leave the house, or you couldn't get toilet paper, you couldn't get water. This was right out of some sort of post-apocalyptic movie. Now for the event in Brazil, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I was kind of okay with the UFC proceeding with that event because it was so early on, people still not knowing what's going on. Granted, the rest of the sports world, the rest of the business world seemed to be thinking a little more forwardly and decided to shut things down. But at the same time, the UFC had already started the fight week proceedings. They had their staff and the fighters were already in Brazil. And then I think the day or 2 days after that is when the NBA shut down, and it all and then Tom Hanks came down with it, and everything just started unraveling from that point on.
So so the NBA shut down on March 11th. That fight was
Wednesday, I believe, right?
Yes, and the fight, of course, was that Saturday. So yes, I agree with you. It was that same week, but it was just like the defiance of like, we're not doing anything about this. Like, what do you mean? Like when every time they got asked about it during that week, it was just weird. It was a weird defiance. It was
very strange, but in that week, I'm a little more forgiving because still we don't know what's going on. And everybody was already there. Things were put in place already. No crowds were allowed. And you saw the media week started evolving to where I believe the media day was totally different. They didn't have the press and the fighters in the same room. And there were so many different things that were being done in those moments. So they figured, okay, we're just going to keep going with this fight and see what happens. However, during that same time, keep in mind too, like a couple weeks before that, Mark Monday became the butt of a lot of jokes because he brought up how South by Southwest was canceled, and they tried to boo him out the building. Dana
Yeah, I remember
laughed it
that.
off like, yeah, right. This is nothing for us. Yeah, we know
Yeah.
what we're doing. Well, now with this going on in Brazil at the time, and the Brazilian government stepping in and making sure that they're not allowing crowds in, and they're doing all sorts of other protocols. If I remember correctly, they were saying they were concerned about health and safety, but there were no COVID protocols in
Right.
place. There was nothing. There were, I believe, Random Marcos, and I'm trying to think. There was one other fighter on that card. They got injured. John McDessie, if I'm not mistaken, um, got some sort of injuries during their fights, and you would say, okay, they need to be quarantined for 10 to 14 days or whatever the case may be, and there was some level of quarantine or self-quarantine from what I understand. However, they still weren't given proper medical attention once in quarantine. So you just got these busted up fighters sitting in a hotel room somewhere, just bleeding out or whatever was going on in their rooms. Um, but even during that fight, and this is where things kind of where I drew the line. I was like, okay, now we've gone a little nutty here. During
Mhm.
that fight, they are still running ads for UFC 249 in its
Yeah.
original
Yeah.
iteration. Tony
Right.
Ferguson and Khabib Nurmagomedov in Brooklyn.
Right.
Um, they're still running those ads. Dana White got on Sports Center that evening to declare how this schedule was still pushing forward. Tyron Woodley versus Leon Edwards was going to be going on in London the very next week. Nothing to worry about.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, so how many of those media reports that were cited in that video came from that time where they pretty much were running reckless?
Right. And
Um,
that's so I want to give a huge shout out to Luke Thomas here. Luke Thomas, he doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't pull any punches when it comes to, talking about this stuff, right? So he put out a fantastic thread that really ran down the entire timeline of every article that was mentioned in this video. Okay. And he provides some real world context, not some, not some Dana hero, glorification moments. Um, he lays it all out. And really one of the first ones was an article that came from The Guardian on March 15th, right after the event concluded. And it was really being critical about, what is the promotion going to do going forward, things like that. They really didn't do anything about this. It's reckless, it's irresponsible, still searching for answers. And then you go down to the 249 being rescheduled. And I remember back to the 249 thing being perplexed. It's like, how can you just as an observer of everything going on, watching everything else going on in the world, and just being absolutely perplexed, where in the face of running an event with all of these questions about what are you going to do about this stuff, and then being like, yeah, we're still doing that next event, like it was nothing. Like, it was so very strange to me. And it really kind of, all the times we've been critical about processes of the UFC and Dana White just being outward defiant or just going against the grain, whether it be for the benefit or detriment of him in the UFC. I remember thinking to myself, Dana's been reckless before with a lot of things, but this is not the time to be that guy. This is the time to listen to science and go with the flow of everyone else. This isn't a stick my neck out and say, I'm different than everyone else. I toot my own horn. I march to the beat of my own drum. I am very different. I was like, this is not the time to be that guy, Dana. Not the time. And it's just very strange. And you also have to think, one of the main reasons, again, as we continue down the timeline a little bit, not too far, the UFC 249 thing and everything like that, that's when we had government regulations starting to roll out about events, sizes, gatherings, things like that, right? And Dana doing everything he could possibly do to skirt around those regulations. We almost had UFC Tachi Palace in 2020 because he could hold it on an Indian reservation, not beholden to federal laws. That's where we were. And there were people glorifying that. I'm like, listen, at the end of the day, we all love watching fights. Me and you train. Like we love participating in any way we can. We're not professional fighters by any means, okay? But we enjoy watching these guys compete, these guys and girls compete. We love it, right? So of course we want to see them compete. We want to see them get paid. And, fighter pay is a thing we talk about all the time. But we want it to be responsibly handled. We want it to be responsibly done. Everything that they were doing at that time from March all the way to May was like, what? Like, it was just a jumble of mess. And then that's when you had the height of all of the questions from MMA media, which really spurned on this. This might as well have been, a video triggering or like targeting that time frame from journalists, because that's the way the whole video painted us.
The video could have just covered March and April.
Yeah.
And been the same. Like, if you put that video out in May, it looks exactly the same.
Exactly. Exactly the same.
It looks exactly the same, like completely unchanged. So, they push forward with this idea that they were going to have this card in London, left fighters stranded in London as travel bans are being enacted. Then the potential, I guess we just call it a smear campaign on Leon Edwards about not wanting the fight, when he had to sacrifice the uncertainty of just leaving his family and having his team leave their families to leave the country, to go to a destination unknown, to a fight unknown, where and when you have no idea. Just hop on this plane and we'll see what happens. But he didn't want the fight. So there's that. There's also, do you remember I don't know who leaked this, but there was some email that went out to a bunch of MMA managers soliciting talent, trying to find people that were willing to step up and fight on like a day or two notice. Location unknown.
Be ready. On standby.
Just be on standby to fight at some point somewhere. You have no idea what or who or anything. So at every step of the way, and this is even before the Tachi Palace thing. I'm willing to assume, we're safe to assume that the Tachi Palace talks started around this point, where they were really trying to just blatantly skirt regulation. Started around this time. What do you think the media is going to do?
Exactly.
I'm not quite understanding where. First and foremost, and I think this is something that the UFC seems to not quite understand. The media is not PR. While there might be, those are related fields. If you've studied public relations and journalism and whatnot in college, which I did, yes, they are related fields. Some of the skill sets transfer, some of the same ideas are there, and I've done PR work as well. I'm part of PR for Karate Combat right now, so yes, I know what PR work looks like. However, nor I, despite how many times we poke fun at each other for tweets being put up on the screen during a UFC event, we are not PR.
Right.
We are not public relations. We are reporters, media, journalists, whatever you want to call us. We are outsiders to the organization known as the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Therefore, we speak as outsiders, meaning we criticize if that's the truth that we see. Everyone with half a brain and a fourth of an eye saw the UFC acting very recklessly, just being defiant for the sake of defiance, for the sake of money, and preserving their broadcasting contracts, which are very lucrative for Endeavor, and quite frankly seem to act as the company's ATM. But we saw this because we're not stupid. And because we are not held by any sort of employer arrangements. We are not employed by the UFC. So we saw them doing something wrong. We called them out.
Right.
Quite frankly, where what do you expect people to do in this scenario? You see people dying, you see people being hospitalized, you see all sorts of chaos going on. Your regular life is upended, and cage fights are supposed to just go on like the rest of the world doesn't exist. It sounds fantastic until you think about the logistics behind it. And quite frankly, the logistics behind it were something that the UFC didn't think about as they kept trying to push forward.
Mm-hmm. The main objective of their thinking at the moment was which location can we secure to put on fights. That was their primary objective at that time. Everything else be damned at the moment. You know, like Tachi Palace. Like you couldn't get a fight anywhere else. You try to get one in Florida, couldn't get in Florida. Let's try Tachi Palace, because you know history of the company goes way back with them, right? So let's go there because we can. And against all wishes of everyone else. And it eventually, you know, like you said, you had that email, and then it got leaked around that same time that Disney executives had to intervene and say, Dana, you're not doing this. Essentially. It's just wild.
And missing from the hit piece, the venom that should have been directed toward the Disney executives and the politicians that prompted them to pull the plug on everything, or I should say implore Dana to pull the plug on everything,
right.
because the UFC probably could have just operated outside of ESPN, and I'm not sure if they have an exclusive deal with them, but they're responsible for so many events that essentially it amounts to not being able to do anything else. But had they decided, yeah, we're going to push through with this anyway, they could have put it on Fight Pass probably.
I am interested how that contract looks now, because everything is on ESPN Plus now.
Right.
Like all of the UFC branded stuff is on ESPN Plus. Fight Pass is everything else that they have contracted.
Yeah, Fight Pass is like licensed, you know, promotions, you know, outside of just promotions that they otherwise probably would have bought, but instead function as broadcast partners, essentially. Now, so you go to Tachi Palace, which Jeff Sherwood broke that news via Twitter, got picked up by the New York Times, and then we really start seeing things unravel. California Governor Gavin Newsom, and I believe Dianne Feinstein is the senator's name, who made the call to Disney to pull the plug on everything. They then moved to Florida, which I guess they tried to get there before, but that didn't quite work out. Somehow or another, things changed, and Florida, being America's armpit, decided, hey, let's go ahead and do this. So they have the 3 events in Jacksonville in a week, which they then have it culminate with the kind of cobbled together version of 249, which ended up being a very good card, you know, just from a pure entertainment fight standpoint. Great card. And in fact,
none of that really matters in this discussion, right?
Yeah, none of that really matters.
Fights are more often than not pretty damn awesome, especially when you have good matchups. So
yes, so there's that, and then this ambitious. Oh, you know what? We didn't even talk about the Apex Center, when that was going to be the destination for UFC 249, and how Nevada Athletic Commission shut that down, along with their plans to run everything out of the Apex Center for the foreseeable future, until Nevada State got their COVID crisis a bit more under control, and the Athletic Commission was willing to allow a limited capacity for their events. They end up in Jacksonville. That goes off fairly successfully, except for the fact that Jacare Souza has COVID-19. They knew that his wife had it before he left to go to the Fighter Hotel. He gets to the Fighter Hotel. He's mingling. He's doing media stuff. He's seen, we're supposed to be masked up the whole time, but we see him no mask, hanging out the weigh-ins, like backstage at the weigh-ins, with all the other fighters just huddled up together, laughing and taking pictures and hugged up with each other and being bros. Jacare's got COVID, so he's off the card. So again, we question, what are you doing here? Why do you have your protocol set up to where someone can bring COVID there? Like, you know that they probably have it, because the man's wife had it. So it's a fair assumption that he's got it, or he's damn sure at risk. But let's bring him to the event site and let him mingle with fighters for a few days, and then we'll pull the plug.
Crazy.
Yeah, just so every step of the way, the UFC has given some reason to say, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?"
Yeah.
Then we go to the hashtag UFC Yacht in International Waters, Fight Island,
Fight Peninsula.
and while Fight Island is a really cool thing to have on a t-shirt, and it was fun to it's going to be like Enter the Dragon and all. It was fun to talk about some of that stuff, and but let's be real, this was created to do what they couldn't do at Tachi Palace, and that's escape government oversight.
Yeah.
The one and only reason that it exists.
And I will say, right around this time when they announced Fight Island, I mean, there was obviously a lot of people being like, "What? You're buying a fucking island? Like what?" That was just the weirdness of it, right? So there was a lot of pushback from that. Like, you're going way out of your way to secure an island to hold fights when governments are saying no, stay in your house, wear a mask, be 6 feet away from each other. Like, sports, sorry. Yeah, everybody wants entertainment, but sorry, we're trying to keep people alive right now. So you go through all of that, and then I think like once the first Fight Island event kind of took place, the first or the second, that's when all of the negativity started to wind down, because we saw what it looked like out there. We saw the quarantine protocols. We saw everybody being locked in their room until they cleared a certain amount of time. Then you get different color wristbands. Then you can go to this part of the area. Then after a certain amount of time, you get a wristband that says you're good to roam wherever the hell you want, because everybody here now has cleared a certain amount of quarantine time. We saw the protocols in place. We saw how it works. That's when all of the questions start going away, because you started answering those questions with the execution of your plans. So there's no more need for it. And then that's when media started to focus back on the fights again. Like,
surprise.
Yeah, I know, right?
Surprise. If we have answers, we ask other questions. It just seems pretty basic. I mean, I can think back to our conversations, our private conversations, and conversations that we had on some platform like this, or like my show Unleashed, or your podcast, any stuff that we were doing at the time. You see the attitudes changing. You could see March, April, how it's like, what is going on? This is a disaster. This is terrible. This needs to stop. People are at risk. It wasn't about, okay, we need to get clicks, because surprise, folks, if there is no mixed martial arts, there is no need for mixed martial arts media. So the last thing that we want to do is shut down the sport.
It's pretty simple.
Some of us like to be employed. Just a wild concept. Yeah. As a grown man, I like having a job.
Weird.
Yeah, so just strange. Yeah. So they go through this. They go through this dog and pony show, essentially. But we start getting answers. And we say, okay, events can go off fairly successfully. Now we start seeing cracks in it. We start seeing, a lot of fights fall out, whole lot of fights fall, especially lately. We've seen that seem to be more frequent now than it was before. But we were seeing flaws in it, but at the same time, they were still trying to address things, and they were still improving upon the system. Mm-hmm. And no one at that point, was critical, at least overly critical, I should say. I'm sure there's somebody who.
Yes, of course.
I'm sure there's a few people, but by and large, the media folks that you can trust for the most part to have fair and balanced opinions across the table, we're like, okay, it's going on, so this is what it is, and they're doing their best to keep things keep things safe. And we're getting reports from people that we consider close friends of ours that are there witnessing all of this, that are going to event after event, and we're at Fight Island, and we're at the Apex Center, and they're getting that long cotton swab shoved up their brain several times a week so they can sit in the building.
Right.
And they are saying to us off the record how things are improving, how they say, oh, yeah, I feel safe. This feels okay. Um, so I'm wondering where the vitriol toward the media should be directed then. In that case, did you have any articles praising um the fact that we had good fights going on once we knew okay it's relatively safe?
No.
I know there are plenty of them that we've read. Didn't see not one mention there.
Yeah, there's plenty of articles that, gave, a pat on the back to the UFC for their efforts and execution of the protocols once we, like you said, started getting answers to the questions that we were asking. Right. And although it was not perfect, because there were definitely issues, like you said, with fights falling out, people were testing positive, but it seemed that they were doing their best effort to keep those people away. Okay, you tested positive. Okay, you're not coming. Or all right, you tested positive. Well, now your fight's scratched.
Unless you're Daniel Cormier.
I was about to say that. Unless it's a title fight or a main event that you can't reschedule again, you got to go ahead and say, hey, we're going to try to keep this thing together, right? But all in all, like I said, the talk started dying. Like the quote unquote negativity towards the UFC started dying down. But all the whole time in the back of our minds, at least for me, I know I'm pretty sure it's the same with you. We were appreciative to see everything as it played out, but in the back of our minds, we're like, we still probably shouldn't be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once you have like a bubble like situation set up, that's different than what we most recently saw, like in Las Vegas. Not to jump too far ahead in the timeline, but when you see reports in Las Vegas, when you have fighters taking Ubers and guys in media, they're really able to do whatever they want amongst the city. There's no area quarantined in Las Vegas, of all places. Like the melting pot of all melting pots, just like where everybody and everyone, tourists from all over the world, are in place. And it's like you have all types of different people from literally all over the globe in this one area, and you're not doing anything to create a quarantine situation. Like, I don't know how many times I saw selfies that week from people covering the fights, no masks on, like outside of the arena. It's like, it's weird. It was weird.
Embedded, like following fighters as they leave the fighter hotel to go to Muay Thai gyms in the area and go to random places on the strip to pick up a burger. Like this is what we were seeing. Now, one thing that Dana was very vocal about after the three events took place in Jacksonville was how other sports leagues were contacting him about how do we do this? How do we get our sports up and running? And pretty much every major sporting league reached out to him, from what we understand, including the NBA. The NBA was able to create a bubble. I believe that was on Disney World in Orlando. They created this bubble, and they played out the rest of their season, playoffs and all,
with zero issues.
With largely zero issues. It was a couple cases of players sneaking women into their hotels.
When I say zero issues, I mean zero players testing positive for COVID. That's
right.
what I mean.
Right, but I'm talking about instances of when the bubble is broken, where with the potential for something to go wrong. So you had knuckleheads doing some knucklehead shit from time to time, which I think is to be expected. But what you had was a truly enforced bubble. That's something that the UFC did not do. They did to an extent. I mean, Fight Island acts as that simply because of the geography. They section off some portion in Abu Dhabi and Yas Island. You just can't leave there because it's like surrounded by water and I don't know, armed guards or whatever the case may be. So I'm not sure. I wasn't there. But in Vegas though, you didn't quite have that. Like I've talked to a few guys, media people that were like, "Hey, I'm stuck in my hotel room." But I wonder how motivated they were to leave. I don't know. I don't think there were
Right.
armed guards there, but still, you get the idea. See, the UFC didn't quite enforce a real bubble. Um, and when you start seeing more cases on the fight cards, more fights dropping out, we lost the past what, something like 6 main events as a
Mhm.
result of COVID.
Yeah.
Some crazy number like that, and there were multiple fights per card that were dropping off. Sometimes the day of. So this was never, this was not a foolproof thing here. But I'm just amazed that the revisionist history got that out of touch with reality. I
Yeah.
didn't see any mention. No, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong in this. And anywhere during that propaganda piece,
Hmm.
was there any tribute to Khabib Nurmagomedov's father?
No, no, there was not.
Interesting. What was there any sort of, like, rest in peace to the family members that Rose Namajunas lost?
Nope.
Interesting. Was there any sort of like get well message for Cody Garbrandt?
No.
Huh.
No.
Did they show any pictures of like Jeff Neal when he was in the hospital?
Nope.
That's strange. Huh.
I guess
You
that wouldn't
sure? They
that doesn't fit the narrative that they were trying to frame there, you know?
they
This was all Dana being super defiant. This wasn't
did
this wasn't a care piece about the people that have been
but
affected.
but you mean they didn't mention Leon Edwards like losing 10 pounds in 3 days because he had COVID, and that
No.
being responsible for losing the main event against Khamzat Chimaev? Like, you sure they didn't?
No.
That's interesting.
No mention of him being stuck in London due to the whole country being shut down.
Hmm. Did they mention
No.
stranding their own fighters in London?
No, none of that.
Huh. That's strange.
It is weird.
Um, that is really bizarre. Like, did they mention at all the changing attitudes of media toward the whole concept of putting on fights during the pandemic?
Nope.
Huh.
Nope. There was a mention, however, of Dana, a quote from Dana saying, I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this so my fighters can get paid and my employees can put food on the table for their families.
Is this the same Dana that also laughed at the idea of John Jones wanting more money because we're in a pandemic? Is that the
I
same
believe,
Dana?
yeah, Dana White. Yeah, I believe so.
And it's not what, it wasn't like Dana Gray or anything like that, or
No,
Dana Fuchsia? You sure?
no, for
Hmm.
sure.
That is
Pretty
interesting.
sure. But it's
That is,
interesting enough,
wow.
That if this entire thing was primarily for the concern of the well-being of the fighters and the employees of the UFC, why was this video not directed towards them and their efforts and their sacrifices that they made to really put on the show in the face of a global pandemic? Yes, it's one thing to have a leader who is willing to defy everything and say, we're going to do this no matter what. We're going to press through no matter what. That's one person saying that. You have to have the fighters who still show up to fight. You have to have the employees from production to, your PR teams, to your everybody involved
The guys
with
that put the octagon
behind the
together.
scenes. Yes, everybody from your internet teams to everybody, social media teams, everybody who makes the UFC what it is when you tune in on Saturday evening, all of those people made it happen at the end of the day. Primarily the fighters, because without the fighters, you don't have a show. But not one mention of them and their sacrifices was in this 5-minute video. It was entirely Dana White, 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 and fuck COVID and fuck everybody who questioned us. That was the theme of this video. If you really wanted to, we were joking earlier before we did this, that if they really wanted to show, hey, we did it. Like, if this was intended to be a we did it, despite all odds, we did it, we pulled off the 2020 year, this entire thing should have been with the tone of thank you to the fighters, thank you to everyone who sacrificed, who lost somebody. Like you said, the the tributes to Habib's dad, to Rose's family, all of those people that truly lost something during this global pandemic. They should have been the focus of this. We did it. Thank you. Instead, this was a fuck everybody. We're here. Like, with no mention of any sympathy towards any of those other things. Craziness. Craziness. This is the tone that they went with to say we made it through 2020.
Really, really interesting turn of events there. Like, so many mixed messages in this little bite-sized package of horseshit. Like, I'm I don't know, man. Like, there are times where, and we've certainly had some of these moments on this very platform. Namely, I'm thinking back to Colby Covington, his, him being whatever he is, and us having this sort of existential crisis. Like, why do I do this? This is one of those moments where you're looking at the absurdity of it all. It's like, wow, why would a sane, rational person want any parts of this? Yeah. This is not the way sane, rational people process information. When I hear that 300 something thousand people have died in this country alone, and we see record levels of unemployment, we see poverty, the likes of which we have not seen. We've seen social unrest. We've seen so many things in the wake of COVID-19. Man, the last thing I think the world needs is Dana White removing a couple of ribs and giving himself a good time. I think that's the last thing we need.
Pretty much.
I'm really at a loss for words of what this is all about. But Matt, perhaps I'll end this on a different note here.
Okay.
There is someone who I think we really need to be extending our sympathies to right now. So, as we said, 24 consecutive weeks for the UFC. That 1 week where there's 3 events. Keep in mind the Contender Series is going on during some of this time as well. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of work for UFC employees, a whole lot going on. Imagine this long stretch ends, and man, coming up, got another week off after that. Man, I need to just kick back, spend time with my family. Oh man, this has been rough. And your boss steps into your cubicle and says, hey, Matt, I know you're really looking forward to having a couple days off here, but we really need this propaganda piece done. Can you put this video together, just showing how great the boss is? Thanks. Imagine that guy.
It's amazing, you, right?
Poor UFC video editor. We salute you.
Amazing. It's incredible. And he had so much creative control over this because of the attacks on particular journalists in this video. Like I said, with Josh Gross, the grudge he has with Josh Gross is just gross.
It's gross. It's like 15 years old.
Not to play man's name. Yes, it's insane.
It's like, just get over it, dude. Like, it's like you're worth like $500 million. Get over it.
Exactly.
Josh Gross lives like in an apartment that's like 15 miles from my house. Like, this man's not balling out of control. He lives the life of a journalist. All right. He's quite frankly one of the best to ever do it. But you won, Dana. Okay. If this is a competition, you won. I'm not understanding why this is still going on. I still find it very comical that AK Lee, who I think is like just like the sweetest person in the world, that this guy's made out to be some sort of bandit on this.
Ridiculous, right?
They turn like the comic fire of Brian Campbell into some sort of G.I. Joe villain, like he's Destro or something. I just think this is absolutely hilarious, disturbing, terrible, troubling. It's a lot of things. It's 2020. There's nothing that says 2020 to me more than this video. What a perfect way to end the year for all the right and all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, 100%. And I know that this video for all of you people watching here on the Body Lock is a lot longer than what we usually do, but that just indicates how ridiculous this was. We had a lot to get off our chests. Please hit the like and subscribe, of course, before we get out of here. But like you said, man, for this to be the thank you 2020 video, like thank you for everyone sticking with us in 2020, essentially, because that's the tone that, like, hey, we got to send a message to everybody now that we've had our last event for the year. We got to send a message to everybody out there. And it's just interesting that they went with the video where it literally has Dana saying, "I don't give a fuck" in it.
When the UFC does return to action, I believe that's January 16th. Do you think anybody's going to ask him about this video?
Of course. Of course. Of course.
I can't wait.
And I already know what his reaction is going to be. So you know what? I'm not going to expect anything. Like, I mean, it's going to be essentially like some form of, I don't give a fuck what you think about it.
Yeah, it's some sort of variation. It's just a matter of what like sort of accessories he puts on the word fuck. I think that's probably what we should be taking prop bets on.
Fuck accessories. I like that.
Yeah, he's not a guy to use motherfucker a whole lot. Like, he just likes fuck, not motherfucker. Like, yeah, that's more of a brother thing. Brothers say motherfucker more often, you know.
For sure.
Yeah, so I don't know. Well, anyway, yeah, you know, times. Very strange times, but what a perfect way to send off a deeply flawed and very character revealing year that was 2020. So as my man said, like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. Keep tuned to the Body Lock. I'm Ant Walker. He's Matt Wells. Stay beautiful, stay positive, stay sexy. Peace.